The Too Tall Sports Podcast is brought to you by Vegas Sports Advantage. Yes, we have our first sponsor. My thanks to them. Clients of Vegas Sports Advantage are winning big in 2021, and you can be a part of the winning too. Become a client today by clicking the link in the description below of the episode or the show notes, wherever you can find the text underneath this episode on your app or on YouTube in the comment section. Use promo code TOOTALL. It's all one word, TOOTALL, Too Tall, and you get 25% off your package thanks to our partnership with Vegas Sports Advantage. They are a bet texting service. They give you tips. They send you the plays right before the game. They're not a sports book. You'll make the plays on your own sports book or own sports betting website. They're just going to text you every day with their best plays. They're killing it this year. So my thanks to Vegas Sports Advantage. I use the service as well. Already made money on it. So I'm a big believer. These guys are doing really good things with their algorithm, and however they figure it out, these guys have the advantage. So that's why they're called Vegas Sports Advantage. Check them out. Use promo code TOOTALL. This is the 2 cents segment, my new segment and the beginning of my podcast, where I kind of give my opinions on what's currently happening in sports. As you guys know, I'm a big basketball guy, baseball too, but basketball is my favorite sport. So I'm going to do a little bit of that today, especially with NBA free agency in full swing. I'm recording this on Tuesday before the Thursday release of this episode. So lots can happen in between now and then, but a lot has happened already. So I want to visit NBA free agency today. Big splash, of course, as a Laker fan, the Russell Westbrook move to Los Angeles is a big deal. If you're a Lakers fan, I've heard both sides. I've heard people on the fence about it because he's been known to be bad at the end of games, and he's kind of a turnover machine, and he takes bad shots, and he doesn't take care of the ball. That is all true. However, Anthony Davis gets hurt a lot. As we saw last year, he falls way too much. He's always on the ground for a big guy. He's always seemingly getting hurt, and he's kind of unreliable, really, at this point of his career. And he's only like 27, maybe 28 years old. So kind of hard to count on AD at this point. And LeBron, as great as he is, he's going to be 37 this year. How much of him, prime LeBron, we're definitely out of his prime, but how much of LeBron do we have left at this level? Probably not a lot. So we got to get a guy that's going to play almost every game, which Westbrook will. He's going to bring intensity. He's going to push these dudes to go to the next level and get back to the championship. And Russ has never won a championship before. So I think he's going to be hungry. And now he's got a real chance. He was just in Washington with the Wizards. No chance of winning a title. The motivation is going to be different now with LeBron and AD. And the standard is, for the Lakers at least, win or go home. Win a championship or go home. There is nothing else. So I do think this is a good move. I know he can be erratic at the end of games. He doesn't shoot the ball well, and the Lakers need shooting. So I do think it's a great move. Now, I do want to talk about some other moves. Apparently, it's a blast from the past week if you're a former Laker. I did make a video about this. If you follow me on Instagram, I made it. You can follow me at Too Tall Sports Podcast, just like the name of the show. Follow me on Instagram, where I'm starting to make more content there. And one of the videos I just did was about how old this Lakers team is. And the big splash today was Carmelo Anthony has signed with the Los Angeles Lakers. At 37 years old, Melo, 36 years old right now, LeBron. You got Dwight Howard, welcome back for the third time. He's going to be 36 in December. You got Marc Gasol still on the roster. He's 36. Trevor Ariza comes back. Talk about blast from the past. He's 36. You got Wayne Ellington, 33. You got Kent Bazemore, another former Laker, 32, and Russell Westbrook's 32. It's an old team. However, young teams don't win in the NBA. So I'm okay with the age of this roster. It's a little older than I'd like, but you still got AD. And they made some young signings today as well. They picked up Kendrick Nunn, the former Miami Heat guard. He's a young guard. We'll see how he can do in this offense. Talen Horton-Tucker, kind of our only asset that the Lakers got to keep. They signed him to a 3-year deal. I like THT. I think he's going to be a good bench player for us. And Malik Monk, a young guy that was in Charlotte the last few years. He's kind of phased out there. He's bounced around a little bit. But I do like the fit there. We need some young athletic guards. So the roster is starting to take shape. But back to young teams, I don't remember the last true young team that won a championship. They're just not ready. They don't have the veteran experience. They don't have the refs on their side, whatever. They don't have the stars yet. So I don't mind. This is what happens when LeBron James comes to your team. You have to go all in. You're going to get rid of almost all your assets. You're going to be old. And when he leaves, you're going to have to rebuild. But when you do have him, you got to go for it. So I'm okay with this for now. As long as everyone's healthy, the Lakers will be back in contention. Just for reference, in 2003, LeBron and Melo got drafted together. Of course, LeBron went number 1 to Cleveland, and Carmelo went number 3 overall to Denver at the time. So it's funny to see the 2003 draft class still live and in effect. And as I mentioned, 2 other guys, the 2004 draft, Dwight Howard went number 1, and Trevor Ariza, former UCLA and former Laker, like I mentioned, Ariza was a second-round pick in the 2004 draft. So totally a blast from the past. I mean, this is an old Lakers squad, but I do like the way it's forming. We'll see how they do. A couple other big moves that I saw. The Miami Heat signed Kyle Lowry. He was kind of phasing out of Toronto. They're moving in a different direction. They wanted to get younger. And Lowry's 35 years old. Again, another old player moving, like Chris Paul. He's older, stayed in Phoenix. I like the Lowry move for Miami. I just don't know if they're really in contention. Like, does that make them a difference maker in the Eastern Conference? Still not better than Milwaukee, even though they did just get PJ Tucker, who won a championship with the Bucks a couple weeks ago. Jimmy Butler is there. They still have their young guards. They got Duncan Robinson, who they signed to a huge contract. Tyler Hero's still there, took a step back last year. And Bam Adebayo. The Heat are good. I don't know if they're championship good. And Brooklyn's going to be back healthy. Milwaukee's going to be back. Who knows what Philadelphia does? I guess the one domino I'm surprised it hasn't fallen yet, and maybe it will by Thursday, but Ben Simmons is still a Philadelphia 76er. I'm not sure why. It's been reported that they've wanted to move him. I don't know why they haven't. Their asking price is pretty steep. They want all kinds of first rounders and all-stars. I don't know. For a guy that got drafted number 1 overall and has gotten worse and can't shoot at all, it's pretty disappointing, I would say, for a number 1 overall pick. He's a great defensive player. He can handle the ball. He's 6'10". He can pass like with the best of them. He does have a lot of skills. I just don't understand why Ben Simmons has gotten worse since he's been in the NBA with NBA coaching and talent around him. I don't understand why he's gotten worse, but he has. So I'm surprised Daryl Morey, the GM of the Philadelphia 76ers, hasn't traded Ben Simmons yet. Maybe he will. The move to make, I think, for them is Portland with Damian Lillard. Clearly, it seems like he is disgruntled and wants out of Portland. I think he's got to find a way to get out of Portland. And if he goes to Philly, they have a legitimate chance to be in contention with him and Embiid to contend for a championship. So I don't know what Dame Lillard's going to do. Maybe he'll give new head coach and former NBA player Chauncey Billups a chance there. But I'd like to see Dame in a winning situation. You kind of want to see, kind of like Chris Paul, even though, as you guys well know, it's documented, I'm not a fan of Chris Paul. But it was good to see at least a player of his caliber playing for something, right? Going back to Carmelo Anthony. It's nice to see him play for something. I think it's cool to see that he's embraced his role as a bench player in Portland, kind of revitalized his career, got over the fact that he's not going to be a starter anymore. So it's cool to see these older, quote unquote, borderline Hall of Famers or legends get a chance to play meaningful games down the stretch. It's been an interesting free agency. A lot of what I would call average players have gotten paid. Like, I'm not a Lonzo Ball guy. I don't know how you guys are. 4 years, $85 million for what I think is an average to below average NBA player, not a difference maker. Again, I'm not a fan of guys that don't really impact the game. Kind of like Kyle Kuzma. If he's not scoring, disappears. He's not really useful in any way. So for Lonzo Ball, who is okay to get that kind of money and free agency, I don't understand that. And there are other guys too. This is just the market. Obviously, there's more money available than ever now. So these guys are going to get paid and there's more money to go around. Man, I just don't understand some of these guys getting max money in 4-year, $80 million deals. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. So the Bulls have been very aggressive, though, speaking of Lonzo. So he goes to Chicago. They made a sign-in trade for DeMar DeRozan. So now he goes there. It's just kind of the Bulls are being really aggressive. I don't know what they're up to. I don't know what this means, but they got Vucevic from the Magic last year. The Bulls are going to be exciting. They still have Zach LaVine, who's a really good player now, not just a dunker anymore. Zach LaVine can shoot with the best of them. So it's pretty interesting how all these teams are trying to shape their rosters. I still think it's probably going to come down to the same teams as always. Brooklyn, Milwaukee now is in it. The Clippers, we'll see what Kawhi does, when he comes back. Obviously, the Lakers are going to be in it. And then what happens to Dallas, Portland? Does Memphis take a step forward? Denver and Utah, do they stay the same? What happens to them? It's kind of up in the air. Houston's, they're obviously on the bottom now, but they're making some moves. But it'll be an interesting season now that hopefully everybody's back healthy. Forgot about the Warriors, of course. Does Klay Thompson come back healthy? What happens to them? Do they make any moves? You never know. But it's been a pretty exciting free agency. NBA has been great. We just had the draft, so lots of stuff happened in there. But it's always exciting to see player movement in the early parts of free agency. So that's all I got for my NBA draft, or I should say, NBA free agency discussion so far. Obviously, a lot can change. It just started a couple days ago, so a lot's going to happen over the next few days and weeks. But hopefully your team, I'm obviously a Laker fan, but if you're not a Laker fan, hopefully your team got better and not worse. We'll see what goes on from here, but enjoy my interview and I'll see you on the other side. Welcome back to another edition of the Too Tall Sports Podcast. Glad to have you in today. My interview is with a sports lawyer, Dan Lust. He's been on TV, media, all kinds of radio. He is like the sports law guru. And he works for a firm called Garagos and Garagos, and they specialize in sports law. So we're talking name, image, likeness. We're talking, Texas and Oklahoma leaving the Big 12 to go to the SEC, all the different cases, some high profile cases like Kobe, like Kevin Durant when he hurt his Achilles with the Warriors, if there was any recourse there. We talk about his background a little bit and we cover all things name, image, and likeness. So I know it's been a hot topic, and I finally got a sports lawyer on there just to talk about it with us. So you can follow him at Sports Law Lust on Twitter, and I believe on Instagram as well. At the end of the episode, he'll give you a place to check him out. He also has a sports law podcast that covers a variety of topics called Conduct Detrimental. Pretty cool title name. Anyways, so yeah, my interview is with Dan Lust today. As always, you can follow me at Too Tall Sports Podcast. That's on Instagram. On Twitter, it's at Too Tall Sports. Please go over to our YouTube channel if you have not already and subscribe. Just type in Too Tall Sports Podcast. You can watch all the interviews there. I record them and I put the videos on there so you can watch the interviews as well. Please like, share, hit the bell notification. Usually we drop episodes every Thursday, 9 a.m. Pacific time. So if you want to watch on there, they will be there. On the audio side, you can go to Apple Podcasts. Just type in Too Tall Sports Podcast. Please scroll all the way down on the episodes on the main page. Find those 5 stars if you could. It would really help boost the show. We got 70 ratings at the time right now, so might have some more by the time this comes out, but we'd love to boost that and get up over 100 ratings of 5-star, of course. Nothing less than that, because we only deliver 5-star content on here. So anyway, do that for me. That'd be awesome. If you'd like to listen on Spotify, we're there as well. Pandora, Amazon Music, Google Play, wherever you get your podcast, just type in Too Tall Sports Podcast. Please subscribe, share, comment, drop me a line. You can email me if you'd like at tootallsportspodcast@gmail.com. And with that, let's get to the sports law guru, Dan Lust. I'll see you on the other side. Too Tall. Going crazy. All right, welcome back to the Too Tall Sports Podcast. My next guest is a sports attorney and professor. He is one of the hosts of the Conduct Detrimental podcast, the #1 sports law podcast. He spent time in the PR department with the New York Giants, and he made his way to Fordham Law School, where he specialized in sports law. He's here to talk to us all about name, image, likeness, what's going on in the college landscape, and all these different topics that had to do with sports law in the past. And you can find him on Twitter at Sports Law Lust. He is Dan Lust. Thank you for being on the show, Dan. I appreciate it.
Brett, I feel like I'm not equipped to be on this podcast. I'm not too tall. No one has ever told me that in the history of my existence.
How tall are you right now?
I think I'm like 5'10" and a half. I think my
Okay.
license plate, my license might say 5'10", but I might have grown a half an inch since I had my two kids. I think
You
it's
know what?
possible.
You can be 6 feet today on this podcast. How's that?
I love it. I love it. It's the only time in my life I will be 6 feet tall. I'll take
There
it.
you go. No, I
How
appreciate
tall
it.
is too tall? How tall is too tall? What are you,
Yeah, see, I'm six
six,
seven,
six?
six
Oh, it's
seven.
close. It's
So I
close.
feel like I'm just out of the range of, clothes, airplanes, comfort, cars, shoes. You can't really buy my kind of stuff at the stores. So it's a tough life out here.
Well, listen, either way, from tall guy to medium sized guy, I'm happy to be on the podcast.
Thank you very much. Glad to
I was gonna
have
say
you.
I was gonna say short guy. I'm not a short guy. I'm like right in the average. I'm good.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, you're definitely not short by any means. So,
Yeah.
but I accept all heights on this podcast. I want to get to your background in a little bit, but I want to hammer this name, image, likeness stuff first. You've been really good about being in the forefront of this. And as you've called it, the wild, wild west right now is kind of what this is. No one knows what's going on. If you could kind of break it down for us and explain what is allowed by these companies, where the universities are not paying the student athletes and what's not allowed, just how does this whole NIL thing work?
Yeah, it's a loaded question. So I guess the easiest way to explain it, and I've for better or for worse, I've been speaking to some agencies, some businesses, some schools. So the truth is, like, no one really knows what it is, right? But lawyers, at least I've been on the scent really for about a year and a half. Since California passed fair pay to play back in 2019, you knew something was going to happen. It was just a question of whether or not the NCAA was going to be okay with it,
Right.
or if we're going to have a real battle between the NCAA and the states. So I guess this is kind of where we start. California passes this thing called fair pay to play. It's the easiest way to explain what it is. It's kind of like an entrepreneurship license. School's not going to pay you, NCAA is not going to pay you, but if you have the ability to, get some sponsorships, some promotion for yourself, you can do it. So the reason that it passed unanimously in California is because, hey, this is a new stream of revenue. If the quarterback can bring in money on his own, it's not going to pull from the schools, not going to pull from the NCAA. No brainer. Let him do it. So, Brett, have you heard of a fancy thing called cut and paste?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay. Just making sure you're with me here.
Yes.
What happened was that one passed so swimmingly over in California that other states basically one by one took what California did. They have obviously slight nuances from state to state. Obviously, Utah is not going to be okay with certain things, right? For example, and then Jersey's going to be okay with certain things, right? Just use your imagination as to what marketers or what type of brands are allowed. But for the most part, these are cut and paste jobs. And the only thing that changed, California's date was going to be effective in 2023. So of all the states, Florida basically copied California, different copycat world we live in politics
Right.
and in sports and really art and anything. And they took it and they put the date as July 1st of 2021. So everyone is kind of coming to the table like, how did this happen on July 1st? Like, isn't that such a random date? Yeah, it is a random date. But once Florida picked it, that became the gold standard. So everybody kept lining up for July 1st. And then SEC country, had all these state bills that were passed on July 1st. So that's really what it is. That's it in a nutshell. And then beyond that, there are some states that don't have any name, image, likeness laws. So, Brendan, we can kind of explain how we got there. But the NCAA was supposed to come up with these NCAA name, image, and likeness. So there would be, on the one hand, states that had state laws. So pretty obvious, you have to abide by state law.
Yeah.
And what the NCAA was going to do and say, hey, if there's a state without NIL laws, we're going to give you what the NIL laws are. And then we can, this involves that Supreme Court case, which you might have some questions on. But
Sure.
After that case, the NCAA basically said, you guys are on your own, fend for yourself. So that has created, as you can imagine, much more questions in those states without any laws whatsoever. No one knows what you can do and you can't do. So a lot of questions, but that's it at kind of a very high level.
Sure. And then moving on from that, I was thinking about you. I think you tweeted about Barstool Sports, kind of the big, I guess you might call it millennial or Gen Z brand, but they're affiliated with Penn National Gaming, which is a sports betting company. So technically, is it legal for Barstool to sponsor a college athlete if they're affiliated with a gaming company?
So I was of the opinion, and I guess this is where it starts, right? Most schools have historically said no deals, no partnerships with the sin companies. That's gambling, that's cannabis, that's alcohol. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm of the generation. I'm turning 33 this year. Brett, how old are you?
I'm 34, so we're the same generation.
Yeah. I had a feeling, right?
Yeah.
Same age. But I watch all the Barstool stuff. I like what Portnoy does for the most part. Obviously, he's a controversial guy. I listen to part of my take.
Yeah.
But as someone that consumes their content, gambling is pretty heavily featured on everything, right? Let's not even talk about the Penn National part that they're owned by a gambling company. 50% of the company's owned, or it's probably like 39% is owned by a gambling company. But Barstool Sportsbook exists. So no one's going to tell me that they're not a gambling company. Maybe they're not DraftKings and FanDuel or Caesars Resorts, and Casino. They're definitely not a gambling company. And then the other thing, Brett, as you know, do you know that guy Dana Beers on Barstool? The guy who chugs all the beers at the games.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's gambling, and then there's the alcohol side of it. And I'm not like a narc. I'm not here to tell on Barstool.
Sure.
But I'm just saying, and I've spoke to a lot of schools. I'm like, if your school has not allowed gambling and alcohol, this is a company that has some tendencies with gambling and alcohol. It's not that bad. It's what makes them popular, but just know that. So maybe in response to me, and I wasn't the only one saying it, but I think I was one of the more vocal people, Barstool made a very public announcement and said that we are not a sponsor. So Brett, when you said, is it okay if Barstool sponsors athletes? I said that was not okay. I don't see how that would be okay if a sponsor isn't there. Okay. So Barstool put out this release to their athletes that they are not a sponsor. They are actually functioning very close to an agency. So they will basically serve as a broker. So everyone signs up to be a Barstool athlete, and then the brands sign up to be Barstool brands or whatever. I'm making up that name, but essentially That's what it would be. Barstool, they're like Tinder in the situation. They put the two together, right? And then if there's a deal that's made, I think Barstool wants to take a little bit of piece of the pie. So I don't know if I think that's better. I know schools have prohibitions on, it doesn't say sponsoring athletes, it says working with companies that do gambling deals. So I still think it's a gray area. I think that's probably a pretty smart move of them to call themselves an agency. I don't think it solves all the concern. But Brett, at a again, like an 8,000 foot level, we're in the weeds here, right? I think Barstool's a gambling company. I'm pretty confident in that. And let's say someone agrees with me, which I've spoke to a lot of schools. A lot of schools agree with me on that point that they're a gambling company. And what are you supposed to do here? You're supposed to rule ineligible all the athletes that have signed up with Barstool? Is that the MO? Because last I checked, 150,000 athletes applied to be a Barstool athlete.
Wow.
Brett, over under the amount of D1 through D3 athletes in the country.
How many are there?
Over under.
I'm going to say, well, if 150,000 applied, I'm going to say 300,000.
You're fairly close. It's about 450.
Wow.
So they have Barstool has a third of all of the athletes that have applied to be Barstool athletes. So you can't rule them all ineligible.
No.
So Barstool kind of got ahead of this so quickly that I think they've kind of forced their way into the space, even though technically I don't think what they're doing was allowed under the old rules, unless we're going to throw all the old rules out, which maybe we are. But yeah, just pointing out that they're it seemed odd, but good on Portnoy. On Portnoy for jamming it down everyone's throat, and so they couldn't say anything about it.
Right. And that kind of leads me to where my next question about what are the university, where do they go from here, right? What do you think the future of the quote unquote student athlete is? If the universities are not paying the athletes or the players, how does it all work from here out for the actual schools?
Well, it's still a recruiting battle. So sure, the school's not going to pay them, but as you can see over in Florida, like I mentioned, Florida was at the head of this movement. If you just ask anybody in the space, Florida was one of the people that was at the epicenter of these deals. So how did that help Florida? I'm sure it seems, I can't really tell you for sure, but there's different deals that are being cut in Florida that aren't really being cut elsewhere. You can read into that what you want.
Yeah.
But the people that help make the Florida laws are very close to the epicenter of some of these deals. So who's in charge of interpreting the law? Who's in charge of enforcing the law? Schools can push the envelope as far as they want to push it, because I'm not sure who's out here enforcing it. I'm not sure who's saying that this is an improper deal with a booster. Is state law going to say that? And state law is going to make, Alabama Crimson Tide look bad by policing Nick Saban for something? I would hope so. I would hope these state laws just exist for a reason, and they just aren't just filler for no reason. But some of these rules say that the schools should not be involved in any NIL deals, right?
It says that boosters should not be involved in any NIL deals. There's a guy, Dan Lambert, who came to terms. He's the guy that put out that like $500,000 deal. If you're a member of the Miami Hurricanes football team, just being a member of the team, you don't do anything else. I think you get like $500 a month or something like that, 5,000, in that vicinity. So I'm like, okay, this guy seems like a booster. He has some connection to MMA, he's some connection to the school. I'm like, I don't know. Wasn't the whole point we weren't supposed to have boosters involved? Wasn't the whole point that we weren't supposed to have pay to play? What did the Miami Hurricanes do? They just exist. If you're on the roster, you get it. So that to me seems like pay to play. If you show up at the university, you're going to get handed a wad of cash. That doesn't seem like what it doesn't seem like what California was at a certain point in time.
Right.
So at some point in time it adjusted. But you asked me, like, what's the role of the schools? Schools are going to educate, and schools are going to say, hey, listen, you come over here, you come to our school. We have an amazing alumni base. We're going to make sure you get paid. Brett, I'll give you an interesting hypothetical, which I don't have an answer to. I just, as a law student, once upon a time they ask hypotheticals. So Brett, let's say, did you play college basketball?
I played college baseball and minor league baseball also.
First base.
Pitcher.
Pitcher.
Yeah.
I was going to say maybe like a John Olerud type.
There you go. Yeah. That's an old school name for you.
Listen, we're the same, more like Randy Johnson. How about that?
Oh yeah. The big
killing pigeons.
He was lefty. Yeah, exactly. He was lefty. I was righty. So, but yeah, similar like that. Yeah.
We could go tit for tat on pitchers. I'll give you another one later if I could think of one. But yeah. So let's say you're a big college pitcher, right? And you're the number one recruit in the country. So the coach tells you, hey, if you come to our school, all I want you to do is set up an online website with T-shirts, and make sure you have an unlimited amount of T-shirts on the website with the Brett Lauren Too Tall podcast logo.
Yeah.
So that's an odd request, but okay, coach, whatever you say. You show up to school, your first day on school, someone has purchased 10,000 of your T-shirts at $20 a T-shirt. Did anything happen that was wrong, right? Did the fans of the university just buy your T-shirts? Did a booster buy your T-shirts? I don't know if there's anything wrong. And is it such a big deal that you've gotten paid to go to a certain school? No, right. I don't really think that's a big deal either. But we still don't know what's legal and what's not legal. Again, I kind of mentioned we had this Supreme Court case, NCAA versus Alston. The NCAA had been planning to hand all of the schools a book. I'm making it up. It's not really a book. I'm sure it was like a PDF that they were sent to somebody. But it was going to outline all the things that you couldn't do. And the NCAA was going to basically troubleshoot. So where the state didn't cover it, the NCAA was going to cover that patch up. So, yeah, I mean, it sounded like it was good in theory. And the NCAA also had a system where they were going to create a third party to kind of vet deals. So anytime a deal would be passed, this third party would say, hey, this is fine. This is booster. No, don't do that. But some type of entity to help oversee this. So when the NCAA versus Alston, the Supreme Court case that was decided in June, just about a month ago, that was a case dealing with athlete compensation. Very, it was a big case. We don't need to get into a little, probably too boring for this podcast. But the point I want people to take away with Justice Kavanaugh in his concurring opinion on June 20th, he wrote, quote, the NCAA is not above the law. So from June 20th until July 1st, two things happened. Right? The NCAA scrapped this third party that was supposed to investigate, and they threw away that, magical book that I was saying. And why? Because if the NCAA were to do something affirmatively, it could be, in trouble legally. That's how people kind of took away. So now you kind of understand in hindsight, the NCAA on July 1st telling schools, hey, you know what, that book, we're throwing it in the garbage. You guys do whatever you want. It's fine. That was a little bit of them playing, legal chess, so to speak. Hey, you can't sue us. We just told them to do whatever they want. What did we do wrong?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's a little chaos right now. Schools don't really have any guidance. Conferences have a lot of power, but they don't want to play favoritism over states. It's very, very complex.
So I was going to ask you, speaking of NCAA, like other than March Madness, what do we really need them for? Like, do you see the NCAA dissolving? Like everyone hates the NCAA. They always seem to get it wrong. So they finally get something right. Now, do we even need the NCAA?
Did they get something right? I missed it.
Well, with the NIL stuff, like outside of that,
I don't think they. Well, back in 2019, they told California, hey, they told the schools, essentially, we're gonna, it's not fair. You're gonna have an unfair advantage. You're gonna ruin college sports. So
right.
They didn't do anything. They just got jammed down their throat from the state and the governments and athletes coming up with deals. So I'll say the NCAA is a nice streak right now of losing every single thing that
They normally do.
What's the opposite of the Midas touch? Like, the Midas touch, you touch things, it turns to gold.
Everything. I guess, I don't know. You get a lump
whatever
of
it is.
coal, maybe.
That's what it is. They're like the Grinch of our world.
Right.
So I think where we're headed towards in this, I know you want to talk a little bit about it. I don't. So to answer your question, I don't know. What does the NCAA do? They negotiate the March Madness deal and they make a lot of money. You and I could negotiate the March Madness deal. It's everyone's dying for the rights to that. Anybody could do that, right? Like, it's not that big of a deal.
Right.
I know Mark Emmerich paid $3 million, and he's the same guy that went, I think it's right around $3 million, but he went up to Congress and said, hey, we need your federal help here because we don't know what we're doing on NIL. Please give us a federal bill. We don't know what we're doing. I'm like, how is that guy, the face of incompetency, getting so much money? Like,
right.
I don't really understand it. And just so people know, it's not like we're not talking in a vacuum. The NCAA does not control college football. They are not involved in the college football playoff. College football is doing okay. I don't know what the need of it is. And then, like last year during the pandemic, when certain conferences were canceling college football and other ones weren't, everyone's like, where's the NCAA? And then, lawyers had to come out and say, well, actually a couple of years ago, it was made pretty clear that the NCAA doesn't involve this. It's really the conference's call if they want to play or not. So I'm like, okay, conferences have all the power. NCAA's messing everything up. Maybe there's a world where just like, conferences secede from, the NCAA. They call themselves something different, whatever they want to call it. And they start a competing entity with the NCAA. It's not that far-fetched. I don't think we're that far away from that being, especially with like super conference talk that, it's been all the rage the last 24 hours.
That's where I was going next, with Texas and Oklahoma trying to leave the Big 12 and go to the SEC. They're the two big brands leaving the Big 12. And then what happens to the Big 12? So where do you think like realignment? I know they said maybe not till 2025, but I mean, it could happen sooner if things get pushed through. How does that all work? Like with the Big 12, is there any recourse for them? Like what happens with them?
Did you see the news with the cease and desist letter? Are you following all that nonsense?
Is that I didn't see that part. What from who?
Oh, this is it's just the cavern. I was gonna spring this on you, Brett, because it's so much fun. Well, hold on. We'll go one step back.
Okay.
Big 12 in Texas, right? For people that don't really know, Big 12 in Texas are two blue bloods in Big 12 country. Big 12 has been one of the foremost conferences in the country for some time, but recent years they've fallen to maybe third or fourth, whichever way you want to put it. They're trending in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So Texas and Oklahoma, the two blue bloods of the conference, they announced their intention to leave. So where do they want to go? They want to go to the SEC. So two things, legal things come into mind. We might, probably by the time this podcast is out, we'll know if the SEC has voted formally to accept the Big 12 or accept Texas and Oklahoma into the SEC. That requires 11 votes, 11 yes votes. So I'm hearing reports that it's going to be unanimous. So don't worry about the SEC bylaws.
Right.
Big 12 bylaws, on the other hand, are very interesting. It says that if a school wants to leave, they can, but they're going to have to pay a very big buyout, which is, by some reports, somewhere between $75 and $100 million.
Crazy.
So it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money. But listen, if you leave the conference, especially the Big 12, which we call it the Big 12, they only have 10 schools. You leave that, you become 9. You leave another one, you become 8. And all of a sudden, the conference is in a little bit of trouble. Because if Oklahoma and Texas go to the SEC, right, that conference now has 16 schools, and Big 12 is left with 8. So, I just bring this up, right? Big 12 is in a lot of trouble. SEC, the gods of the world. So, could the SEC secede? Could they get another 16 teams and create like a 32-team league? Sure. I don't know what they're going to do, but they have a war chest. And Brett, they make, if you want to believe last year's numbers, if they take Oklahoma and Texas, their annual revenue is going to be basically on par with the NCAA as a whole. So it's the super conference stuff we're not so far off from it, but I don't know. I could keep going. I could tell you about that cease and desist, which is kind of.
Well, what was it? Just cease and desist from who?
Okay, you ready for this?
Yes.
Brett, are you sitting down? You're very tall. I hope you're sitting down for this.
Yes, I'm ready.
The Big 12 commissioner, Bob Bowlsky, last night sent a cease and desist letter, not to Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, sent a cease and desist letter to ESPN for allegedly helping or trying to help of the remaining 8 schools try to help them go to a different conference is the allegation it's putting out there. So that ESPN, at least allegedly, was this middleman in this transaction, that they were, at least according to Bob Bowlsky, he says he has hard proof that they were trying to help basically poach more schools from the Big 12. So it just took a whole other interesting level. This is, now you know why I've been doing radio all day. This is it's a massive
for
allegation.
sure. Isn't there? I think ESPN owns SEC Network. Is that part of the reason? Yeah. So they want those big schools to go play on the SEC Network.
Or they just want one less Power 5 conference. Then I imagine there's more revenue for their partners. You know.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes total sense.
Interesting.
Yeah. We'll see what happens in the Big 12 where all these schools go. I mean, and Baylor just won the national championship in basketball. So it's not, I mean, they have some schools, Kansas, you know, they got other schools. But you lose Texas, Oklahoma, it's going to be tough. I did want to ask you, there's other stuff in the news lately about Reggie Bush wanting to get his Heisman back after all the scandals and stuff like that. And now that there's NIL available, maybe he can get it back. They're saying, no, he can't get it back. What are your thoughts on that? Does he have any a case against it?
You know, I try to be pretty consistent. I know there's some like pundits that'll like say one thing here, one thing there. I don't know. Maybe it's controversial, but like if there was something illegal at the time and you did it knowing that it was illegal,
yeah,
I'm in favor of clean rules. It was illegal back then. You knew it was illegal. You did it anyway. Yeah. Do I think it should have been illegal? No, I don't. I've never been in favor of athletes not getting paid. But you knew it was illegal, and everyone else around you seemed to be okay, not taking $300,000. Or if they took it, they were a little bit smarter about it. You're the only one that got caught. So, you know, if the NCAA wanted to give him his Heisman Trophy back, by the way, Brett, did they take the physical trophy or they just don't recognize it? I don't know what this means to give it to him back. I've always been confused by this.
I think it's like physical. It's like the principle of it. Like they physically have it and they're not giving him the gift almost of having it. Like I don't think he has the trophy.
But didn't he? So he had it at one point and they knocked on his door one day. They're like, listen, you accepted $300,000. That is our property. We're taking it back.
I'm not 100%,
that's
but
insane.
I think it's a real thing. Like that's also like, you know, also the symbolism of it. You don't get to hold on to this trophy. You know what I mean?
It's stupid. I saw the same stuff with Terrell Pryor. Those guys were like selling their part of their equipment after the fact. And they're like, we want to get our wins back because you stripped our wins from the record. I'm like, all this win stuff is nonsense. Stripping wins from the record.
That's
record
crazy.
books. Like, okay. Yeah. So I don't know. You can't, you know, like the NCAA is already incompetent enough. Imagine if you put that on their plate to kind of unwind all the prior harms that have occurred.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not possible.
They're not going to do that.
Yeah, they're not going to do it. But it just, you know, the way that we live it as a society, you have to have rules are rules. Like, again, I'm not a narc. I'm not someone that is like Mr. Rule Man. But like, you know, Reggie Bush broke the rule. So what, we can't just like forgive him after the fact. He broke the rule. He shouldn't have accepted money then. Or again, should have been smarter about it.
Right, for sure. I want to make sure we're good on time here, but I do want to get a little bit of your background. So I heard you in an interview say you came from a family full of lawyers. So was it, did you have a choice to be anything else but a lawyer when you were younger?
I like the research you did for this podcast, Brett.
Hey,
this
man,
is
I
good.
got to be prepared. I got, you know, especially for someone like you, I got to be ready to go.
I'm flattered, number one, but you could have just winged this and it would have gone just as beautifully as it's going right now.
Yeah, thank you.
So my dad's a lawyer, my sister's a lawyer, my wife is a lawyer, uncles, got a lot of lawyers in the family. So I grew up, even though I had, you know, maybe law in my blood, I was a huge sports fan. So I didn't, you know, maybe like there were some people that I went to high school with that were like, you know, gunning to be straight A student, Mr. Ivy League. And I like I never thought about working for a hedge fund or anything like that. I just always just really enjoyed sports. Was very passionate about my fantasy leagues, which I'm sure half the people listening to this podcast are. And when push came to shove, I got when I got into college, my dad was a lawyer. So he's like, hey, do you want to work for this law firm? You want to intern for this judge? I'm like, sure. Like, I don't know. I'm not fucking doing anything else. Why not? But I got very lucky. The Giants job opened up. That was the first thing I had any involvement with anything sports related. I worked, so I went to school at Union College, small school in a D3 school in Schenectady, New York. And we got very lucky that Giants training camp, New York Football Giants training camp, was in Albany, New York, which is about 5 minutes from where I went to school. So part of the interview was, do you know the area? Do you have a car? So in addition to knowing a lot about Giants football, I knew the area. I had a car. I could explain where I could do where the airports were. I knew the hospital was. I knew all this nonsense. So it definitely helped. And that was really that was really my foray into it. So I think I was always going to be a lawyer, just the way that the life was setting up for itself. But sometimes, I was all I did in my spare time was pay attention to sports. So it just kind of pulled me in this kind of dual direction here.
Now, when you went to Fordham, is there a sports law program, or did you just kind of go like on your own on that?
Yes and no. There's a sports law program. It was fairly small. It was maybe like 5 people in it. So I wrote so just like you do for college, write a personal statement. And I went on the Fordham website, and there was something called the Fordham Sports Law Forum, which sounded really cool. A year later, I would find out that it was not really that cool. It was like 5 members and no one did anything. But the Fordham was one of a handful of schools that had the sports law program or society on their website that they advertised. It's kind of like pre-Twitter or pre-Instagram, so I didn't really know the landscape. But I wrote my personal statement. I said, hey, I have this interesting sports background. I work for the Giants, and my family's lawyers. So, you seem to be one of the foremost leaders in sports law. So anyway, I went. I'm sure they didn't read my personal statement. I'm sure they threw it in the garbage, and they didn't think about it. But when I got there, I found this society, and I'm like, so what do you guys do? And they explain they have they bring speakers in, they bring alumni in, normal stuff. And then they said, we also compete in this thing called the Tulane Baseball Arbitration Competition. Have you ever heard of this, Brett? It's cool. You know baseball arbitration, right?
Yeah.
It's basically mock trial, but for baseball arbitration.
Very cool.
So
yeah, that's cool. Basically, where the teams try to tell the player how unvaluable they are, and the player's like, what are you talking about? Look at my numbers, Yeah.
Yeah, the long and short. So Brett, let's say you're a first-year eligible player, and your agent goes, yeah, Brett had a great year. Let's look at his 3 years before this. Here, Brett looks like a guy in the past that's probably earned right around $5 million. So, but Brett's a great guy. We're going to ask for $5.5 million. And the team comes in and they're like, yeah, Brett, but he's kind of injury prone. He's kind of, his frame looks like he's probably going to get hurt at some point in time. I might be hitting too close to home. Maybe.
You're 100% right. I did get hurt a few times. But I was worth $5 million. Never got it, but I was worth it.
But yeah, the team knocks it down, and then you find a number in the middle. So you have a judge, it's an arbitrator, but a judge makes a decision. So it sounds a lot like, going to court, you're arguing this. So me, I was not Mr. Lawyer. My parents were lawyers, and, had my blood, but I know how to argue a case. But then when they explained this Tulane baseball arbitration thing to me, I'm like, oh, so this is literally like my fantasy auction draft, and I can just argue and yell at people. I will crush this. So I won the intra-school competition at Fordham to compete in it. And then Fordham flew us down, and I was hooked. I'm like, this thing is the coolest thing. So I don't know. I'm probably saying too much, but
oh, that's awesome.
But I guess you asked me how kind of I left my footprint on the school. That was the only competition of its sort in the country. And I went there and I coached the next year after I competed. And then eventually I became president of the society. So I'm like, I don't know, I've done a lot of things in my life. Competing it and coaching it were 2 of the top things in my life, obviously pre-kids, pre-wife, pre all this stuff. And I'm like, this has to exist at other schools. I can't understand it. So I created my 3rd year in law school, my last year, the Fordham National Basketball Negotiation Competition. So I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to make any money off this, but it's going to help the school, all this other stuff. So fast forward, Fordham was a pioneer in that space. They were the 3rd school. There was another school that did one in the middle on the West Coast. But now there's hockey competitions, football competitions. There's 2 baseball competitions. There's maybe about 20, 25, but 9 years ago, it just was not a thought. Nobody considered it. So, you know what? I helped put Fordham on the map. I'll take it.
That's awesome, man. That's really cool. I mean, it's a whole world to get into, which is great. I did want to ask you about the company. I see the sign behind you, Garagos and Garagos, which is the firm you work for. Now, do you just do sports law there, or are there any other types of cases that you take with them?
So probably I could correct any myths or anything. I got this job, Brett, and I know you saw my background. I worked at 2 non-sports firms, just litigation. I really wanted to work in sports forever. But when I graduated, as much as my background was sports law heavy, no sports law job. So I worked for 7 years, different litigation firms. I was published in stuff that has nothing to do with cases. I presented to judges, nothing to do with sports, but I'm obviously just a huge sports fan.
Right.
So, but about 2.5 years ago, a little bit more, right around there, I started, and I know, Brett, that's how you found me. I started writing a lot, these kind of short articles and maybe threads on Twitter, and we started our podcast, and I started becoming kind of a media person in the space, even though I was not practicing any sports law at all, zero. So what happened was, I made a name for myself as just kind of the sports law media person, but my background was just like a trial attorney. I was, handling cases, writing motions, and the firm I'm at now, Garagos and Garagos, who has a, long sports law history, basically said, hey, you want to come work for us and like actually practice sports law? And I'm like, sure. And they're like, just so you know, like, you're going to have to do a lot of other stuff that is not sports law, but we do have sports law cases. So I'd say probably like anywhere between 25 and 40% of my cases are sports or entertainment or something in that vicinity. Hollywood, we have different TV stuff and entertainment stuff. I'd say majority of that percentage is sports. And then the other part's just like, normal civil commercial cases, but maybe one day I'll practice 100% sports law. Maybe we're trending in that direction. But yeah, I'm just a lawyer. And Brett, you've seen my content. I just approach all of these sports disputes as a lawyer would. Like, I am actually a full-blown lawyer, which I think gives a little bit more credibility to like any of these takes. It's like, I'm like, yeah, this is what the commissioner of the Big 12 is thinking when he sends in a cease and desist letter. Because I am actually just a lawyer. Like, I don't have any allegiances to the conferences, to the schools. Right. I'm just someone out in the sidelines just commenting on it.
No, I think that's great. And I think people need to hear that too, because obviously us outsiders that are non-lawyers, we don't know what any of this legal jargon means or what's allowed and what's not allowed. So I appreciate that. So I'm glad you do that. I want to talk about one of the articles you wrote, which was about Kevin Durant when he tore his Achilles and how he might go after the Warriors for, before his free agency period. Was there anything there? What was the course of action and kind of what was your angle for that story?
That was the story that really helped me break into the industry, truthfully. So I was writing for my firm's blog, which nobody read. I think I was the only reader of my firm's blog. I thought I was writing about some interesting stuff, but it's hard to kind of crack that landscape.
Sure.
So part of what I do I don't do it anymore, but I used to do a lot of work on the defense side. So when someone would get sued, I would do it like, it's called insurance defense, but like, put it this way, like, Brett, do you know that McDonald's hot coffee case when we were younger? You heard about the case?
Yes. The woman won because she spilled coffee. Yeah.
Right. Spills hot coffee on herself. So the woman, right, she's got a personal injury lawyer. On the other side, McDonald's has what we call an insurance defense lawyer. They have to have someone defend them. So I would defend corporations that were sued for some type of either personal injury or breach of contract or something, but on the defense side. So the insurance companies would pay our bills. Not sexy work at all, but you had some fun cases here and there, and you learned a lot. So some of what I did involved, not a very small portion, but medical malpractice. If doctors were to do something wrong, I knew enough about it. My dad had practiced as a medical malpractice attorney, so I know how to speak. I know how to spot issues. So as a basketball fan and also as a Knicks fan, if you remember during that finals, the Raptors-Warriors finals, Durant had strained his calf, I think against the Rockets. Maybe even against the Blazers in an earlier series, but he had been out for about a month. And the Warriors went down in that series and they're like, they're like, Durant's going to come back and play in this game. And I'm like, wait, Durant is going to come back? He's about to be a free agent and get like a monstrous deal with the Knicks or the Nets. Like, why would he play in this game? Like, they're down 3-1. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, okay, I guess maybe he wants to do like, be like a hero and Superman and come back and win the game, I guess. I don't know why. So he starts the game and he plays every minute of the game up until I think it was like midway through the first quarter, tears his Achilles.
Yeah.
So I'm like to myself, again, as a lawyer watching this, not necessarily as a sportsman, maybe some combination. I'm like, is it possible that like the Warriors just told him it was safe to play and it wasn't? Because I know how the human body works. If your hamstring or your calf is not ready, if anything in your leg is not ready to go, other portions of your leg are going to overcompensate to try to make up for it. So It was the same. I'm not sure if it was the calf or the hamstring, but it was the same leg. And I'm like, seems to me like you're probably related. Like first game back, hurts himself a couple minutes into the game. And I go, the Warriors are down 3-1. They have all the incentive to tell him to play. I'm like, Durant doesn't have that much incentive. So I'm like, okay, is it possible if a doctor in any other context, like a construction context, clears, like let's say I broke a leg and the construction doctor says, hey, you're safe to return. And then I re-break it. I looked up these cases online. I did some legal research. And I'm like, yeah, that's a lawsuit. It's not being properly advised of the risk of re-injury. So I'm like, did I just stumble across something here? Like Durant can sue the Warriors, like different question as to whether or not he will, but he can if he wants to. He definitely could. So then I started thinking, I'm like, okay, I have something here. Let me make this the best article I've written in my entire life. Like, let me spend way too much time on it. And I came up with this angle because Durant makes 50, at the time, he was making close to like 100 million on and off the court. And I had looked just as a lawyer, and again, hindsight being 2020, Durant made a fairly full recovery. But in the history of basketball, prior to Durant, like no one recovered. And even guys now that get the Achilles don't recover. Like Boogie Cousins went from a max player to like a potato. Like he's not that good. Like it happens to everyone. So I said, I don't know if Durant is like this freak athlete, sure, maybe he has no injuries and no damages, but like, I don't know, like if Durant is human, which, spoiler alert, I guess he's not, this is a monstrous lawsuit. And I go, I think that this will mean that he is not going to re-sign with Golden State. So I don't know if that played into role, but I was right about that in my various takes. And then people said, like, where's Durant going to go? Let's bring on this kooky lawyer who has this crazy article and let's have him defend it. And because I guess it's the slow dog days of like June and July when there's no basketball, there's no hockey. It's just us. So I got on all these different shows talking about this article. And then, I did that cycle. And then I think I impressed enough that when the next issues came up, be it Antonio Brown or, even the passing of the late, great Kobe Bryant, they said, hey, is there a lawyer that doesn't sound like a lawyer? He can just talk like a sports fan. And I kept getting the call over and over. And then, eventually led me to the new job and, the professor. And so I have that article to thank. I really do.
I had that written down, actually, your perfect segue into the Kobe stuff. Is there anything there just quickly on that you think there was an argument or a case there, which way it should have gone or should go from now on?
In terms of what? In terms of helicopter safety?
Yeah, all that stuff that happened with Kobe's unfortunate passing. I think his wife, or former wife, is suing them, the helicopter company, and all that.
I grew up with Kobe. I knew exactly where I was when I heard the news that he passed away, and I had wrote an article. It was probably the last truth article I wrote. Now, I help. Oh, we'll get into it, but I was a little concerned. I don't know what the numbers are, and I'm happy I don't, because then I'm in a weird spot about reporting on something that's a little uncomfortable. But yeah, Vanessa Bryant, the widow of Kobe Bryant, put a claim into this crash, that she wanted to be compensated for the passing of Kobe Bryant. Kobe, at his time of his passing, was worth, I think, according to Forbes, like $600 million. So, okay, that's not, again, I practice in the insurance defense world. You don't necessarily get what you're worth. You get how much insurance coverage there is. And if there's not enough sufficient coverage, the company, whatever it is, has to maybe sell assets. So the helicopter company doesn't have $600 million in assets. They have something less than that. Insurance policy, I don't know what it covers. It's not $600 million.
Right.
So Kobe wasn't the only one in that helicopter, though. So there were other families in that helicopter. Yeah. So that insurance policy isn't per person. It's like the aggregate of all the people with respect to that incident. So, I wrote an article on it, which, it picked up some traction, but I'm like, yeah, think about it like a piece of pie, right? If Vanessa's entitled to 90% of the piece of pie, like maybe the other victims of the crash would be better off if Vanessa didn't make a claim, right? Because the Bryants probably have enough money. They probably don't need to make another dollar in their life. So it's a little bit uncomfortable, but I just pointing it out. And I think that's why people tune into our show and our content. Like, I just tell you the legal stuff. If you get pissed off at me that you're in Big 12 country and I say your conference is a lot of trouble, I'm sorry. It's just how I see it. But yeah, that's how I felt with the Vanessa stuff. But they settled it. Vanessa was part of the settlement. All the cases were wrapped up. I think there's maybe some cases kicking around between like air traffic control and the helicopter company, but the main portion of the case has been resolved.
As far as speaking of you doing a lot of media, is your company okay? Obviously, you do a ton of it, so they're probably okay with it. But what are you allowed to say and not allowed to say?
I was going to say something I probably shouldn't say, but let's just say not all firms are as open to doing this. The head of my firm is a guy named Mark Garagos. His name is in the background on Zoom here. Mark, it was just kind of a happy marriage. Mark does this for every network, right? Mark's done it for CNN, for Fox, for NBC, for CBS. Mark's like the television lawyer. So, I do a lot of radio. I'm not anywhere close to Mark's stratosphere, but Mark has found a way to create a law firm around the media he does. So it's just kind of a natural marriage that we found each other. So I do a lot of media. It sometimes a lot of it's good. Some business is coming out of it, which is good. But I just like getting my name out there. And then if like Brett, like if a fancy roller derby team in Cleveland, if you know what I'm talking about, wants to call me, like I'm okay with that too.
All right, that's cool. I appreciate that. All right, so Conduct Detrimental, the #1 sports law podcast. Tell us about it.
Brett, I feel like you didn't get my roller derby joke.
I didn't get it, so I just
oh man.
Is it way before my time?
Listen.
Go ahead.
No, Brett, listen. I'm going to call you out here. Listen, you have a podcast, Too Tall podcast, right? Like I just like this roller derby story is the biggest story that no one's talking about, except it made our website basically crash yesterday because it's a very big story and now everyone's talking about it.
I don't know about this story. I'm sorry. I'm trying to go, get you on timeline, but fill me in.
You're good. Don't worry about the time.
Okay.
Brett, do you know what the new Cleveland baseball team's
the Guardians
name is?
Yes.
So well, actually, I'll just tell you. I won't.
Go ahead, just say it, man. I don't want to think that much.
I thought the Cleveland Guardians. It's okay. Is it a good name? I don't really care about Cleveland baseball.
Yeah.
But then I see this really fun thing. I go to clevelandguardians.com, and if you're listening to the show, listening to the podcast, I would tell you right now to go to clevelandguardians.com. Hopefully it's still what it looks like. But it is owned by a roller derby team. Then I went to the Instagram.
Yes, I
account.
did see you talk about that. They didn't own the website for clevelandguardians.com.
They still do not own the website. They still don't own the Instagram or the Facebook. So we've been having a lot of fun. Behind the scenes, I've made a lot of roller derby friends. I didn't even know there was a roller derby community, but we touch these weird stories. We show this, cast a light on just interesting legal disputes. Right now, there's a trademark battle that was going on between the Cleveland Indians and someone that had taken out the Cleveland Guardians trademark. And then, separately, there's a negotiation, I imagine, going behind the scenes for quite a big payout for a roller derby team that just happened to pick, clevelandguardians.com. So yeah, I don't know. So I guess that's our podcast in a nutshell. We obviously cover stuff that actually people care about. We cover the Big 12 SEC dispute. We cover the Deshaun Watson stuff, the Trevor Bauer stuff. And we have a once a week podcast called Conduct Detrimental. And then that did so well, so big amongst law students and lawyers, people that wanted to contribute, but we just didn't have anywhere to put them. So we created a website called conductdetrimental.com. And we said, hey, you went to law school, you're a lawyer, or if you're pre-law, or you're just interested, like Brett, like in baseball arbitration topics, like touch on something sports or legal related, write for us. We will promote it. I will give it. If you write a good article, I will give it to my contacts in Nashville or Houston. I am here to help people, make contact. So that's all we do. So conductdetrimental.com, the podcast, and the website is where to find us.
That's awesome, man. No, really cool. Everybody should tune into that. And you're at Sports Law Lust on Twitter, and you do a great job on there. So that's great. I love the stuff you're putting out. Nobody really does it like that, as far as I know, but you're the most fun and out there with it. So I do appreciate that, and loved having you on the show. I'd love to do another one, but I know you're a busy man, so maybe we can get you down the road.
All good. And just for those that don't have Twitter, I'm on Instagram too at Sports Law Lust. We probably have more fun there, Brett, than we do on Twitter because we can have some fun in the stories.
There you go. I'm going to follow you there and have everybody else do it too. So thank you very much, Dan. I really appreciate it.
All good, Brett. My pleasure.
And before we go, once again, I'd like to thank our new sponsor, VegasSportsAdvantage.com. They send out expert picks daily and they help clients win big. Click the link below or in the bio, wherever the comments you can find, where you can use my promo code Too Tall. That's TOOTALL. It's one word. You get 25% off all the text packages today. So once again, my promo code to get 25% off the service. TOOTALL. It's one word, Too Tall, and you get 25% off for your texting packages. They got great plays. They text you the picks right before the game starts. You go bet them on your own sports book or sports betting website. I use the service. It's going great so far, so highly recommend. These guys have been awesome to me. So VegasSportsAdvantage.com. Make sure you use promo code Too Tall so you can help the show as well as help yourself make a lot of money this year on sports bets. Thanks again. I know he talks fast, but that was a hell of an interview. My thanks to Dan Lust. That was a lot of great information. That was a lot of fun, really engaging. I really appreciate him jumping on with us, and he's limited on time. That's why I was trying to keep it moving. But hopefully you guys loved that episode. I loved it. A lot of great information, just the stuff you don't really get to hear. So it's great to have a sports lawyer on to kind of break down some of this name, image, and likeness stuff, among other topics as well. So my thanks to Dan Lust. As he said, you can follow him on his channels at Sports Law Lust, and you can follow his podcast, Conduct Detrimental. As for this show, you can always follow me at Too Tall Sports Podcast. I really appreciate that. You can follow along. I'm putting a lot more content out nowadays, so check out a bunch of videos I'm making and putting out relevant topics and my take on those. So I think the response has been great, and I love to hear your guys' feedback on that. So thank you very much for that. On Twitter, it's at Too Tall Sports. On YouTube, check out our YouTube channel. I know I said it twice. You can just type in Too Tall Sports Podcast. Please go over there, check it out, subscribe, hit the bell notification to get notified every time we drop an episode, which is Thursdays at 9 a.m. Pacific. All of the interviews are on video there, and you can hear the audio on other platforms. But if you want to watch the interviews, you can watch us chit chat on YouTube. Just type in Too Tall Sports Podcast. If you want to listen to it and be on the go, Apple Podcast is one of our bigger platforms, so please go there, Too Tall Sports Podcast. Scroll down if you could while you're listening, or at some point hit the 5-star rating. We're trying to get over 100 ratings. We're at 70, I think, right now, so we're climbing up there just to get some more exposure for the show. I'd really appreciate it. So head on over to Apple Podcast. Give me a 5-star for the 5-star content that we are delivering. On Spotify, we're there. Same thing, Too Tall Sports Podcast. Pandora Music, Amazon Music, Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts, we're there. Just type in Too Tall Sports Podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next week for another great episode. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.